office. It is a real pleasure to once again host another international seminar. The CFCC has held a number of seminars and regularly meets different ambassadors from around the world once to twice a month. And last week we had a interaction with the chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, Tom Tugendhat, on looking at the United Kingdom's post-Brexit global outlook covering China. And so today it is absolutely superb to be able to have three ambassadors, from three countries, which the United Kingdom has amazing, strong relationships with. And the timing of this seminar is very, if I may say, on the right pulse, because there's lots happening in the Middle East and the Gulf region. So the title, The Future of Israel-UAE-Bahrain Relationship with the UK after the Abrahamic Accords. I think there's lots that's been written, there's lots that's been said, and I think it's absolutely superb that we have three ambassadors who are able to give an overall assessment of what they make of the Abrahamic Accords and looking at prosperity, peace, and security in the region. For me, as the former Prime Minister's Special Envoy for Religious Freedom, I know both Bahrain, with its strong religious freedom aspect, with having a synagogue for over 100 years and a temple for 200 years, has a very strong track record. With the UAE, it also has a very strong track record on religious freedom. With His Holiness Pope Francis was in the UAE with the Imam of Al-Azhar, looking at the fraternity documents that were signed between the Islamic world and the Holy See. And I know with the Abrahamic House that is being set up in the UAE, which will have a synagogue, a church, and a mosque all coming together. So the mutual acceptance of one another is very much to the core. And of course, as we know, with Israel and Jerusalem, being key to all three Abrahamic faiths, is freedom of religion or belief is a core that brings all three countries together. So for today's purposes, what we'll do is the order that we have is the introduction by myself. Then we have 15 minutes. I've got my order paper. This is no preference of which ambassador I've chosen. This is done by draw by Melissa, our secretary. We have ambassador of Bahrain, we have the UAE ambassador, and we have the ambassador for Israel. For speaking up to 15 minutes. And after that, we have a Q&A chaired by our brilliant executive member, Dr. Ilma Bogdan, who has been superb in helping organize today's event. And then we wrap up around 7:15. And if I may say to the ambassadors, it says up to 15. You can choose to use the full 15 minutes, or you can use a short amount of time to give your overall summary of how you see the situation. And then we can have Q&A afterwards. So without further ado, can I first of all go to His Excellency Ambassador Fawaz Khalifa of Bahrain to the United Kingdom. Just a brief outline. He's been the ambassador since 2015 to the United Kingdom. Apart from the United Kingdom, he is also the ambassador, the Bahrain's ambassador to Netherlands, to Ireland, to Spain, to Norway, and to Sweden. And I think with all those different countries, he can help us with the Brexit talks, which we have, Ambassador. But no, apart from his time here in the United Kingdom, he's been a minister in his own country. He's been commissioned at Sandhurst from the military perspective, and also he's studied in the United States at the American University in Washington, D.C., which we will not hold against him, because one of the other ambassadors has studied in Leeds, United Kingdom. But no, so without further ado, Ambassador, Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Rahman. Mr. CFCC Chair, Your Excellencies, distinguished CFCC members. I am delighted that Rahman Chishti has invited me to say a few words in this online panel alongside my colleagues from UAE and Israel. And I look forward to an interesting and informative Q&A session. Before turning to the implication for the UK, I want first to say a few words about the background of the Abraham Accords, how Bahrain came to sign them, and what they mean for the Middle East. For the Kingdom of Bahrain, signing the Abraham Accords is not a short-term policy or a reaction to a particular situation. Rather, It builds on Bahrain's long-standing tradition and culture of openness, coexistence, and dialogue. As I am aware, as I am sure many of you know, Bahrain is probably the most religiously diverse state in the Gulf, with thriving communities and places of worship of all faiths. We have a Hindu temple that is over 200 years, while our indigenous Jewish community has been proud to call Bahrain home for over a century and continues to play a full and active part in our national life in both government and wider society. Indeed, it has been a great pleasure to work with Rahman in his role as Special Envoy on freedom of religion and belief, and to brief him on Bahrain's long-standing religious freedom. I greatly appreciate his support and that of the UK government in raising awareness of Bahrain's deep-rooted religious tolerance and in highlighting that this culture of coexistence has such a long history in the kingdom. In recent years, His Majesty King Hamad has built on these foundations and has reached out to foster dialogue and mutual respect between faiths and peoples. The King Hamad Global Center for Peaceful Coexistence has worked at a practical level to increase knowledge and understanding, while the groundbreaking 2017 Bahrain Declaration sets out the principles of religious tolerance and coexistence and was unveiled in partnership with the Simon Wiesenthal Center. This is the background to Bahrain's signature of the Abraham Accords, which I believe represents the most significant opportunity in decades to deliver a sustainable peace in the Middle East, based on a two-state solution, which protects the rights, interests, and security of all people of the The key now is to continue this momentum and to ensure that this new optimism translates into real progress towards a lasting resolution. In Bahrain, we are determined to play a full part in this process. That is why, like our brothers in the UAE, we have moved fast to build on the accords and establish a warm peace of wide-ranging contacts and cooperation. Doing so will build a network of ties at all levels of society that are essential to a durable relationship between the states and the peoples. For example, Bahrain and Israel have already signed or have agreed up to 14 daily or weekly direct flights between them. And from the beginning of this month, online visas have been available to each other's citizens. The opening of embassies is also imminent. Meanwhile, agreements have been signed or under active consideration in areas as diverse as trade, investment, banking, health, education, communication, technology, and innovation, to name just a few. Ladies and gentlemen, so how will the Abraham Accords affect the UK's relation with the three countries? The UK has a history of playing a constructive role in regional security. For Bahrain, for example, we are proud to host the Royal Navy Support Facility in Jubail, and we recognize the value of our close cooperation with our British friends in security and so many other areas. In addition, the UK has warm ties with all three countries represented today and shares with them a broad range of values and interests. This combination means that the United Kingdom is in a strong position both to benefit from the Abraham Accords and to contribute to their promise of a stable, secure, and a peaceful Middle East. Post-Brexit, for example, it is well placed to take the many economic and investment opportunities that will flow from the Abraham Accords, whether in individual countries or the region as a whole. More broadly, the UK strength sectors such as finance, technology, education, high-quality manufacturing mean that British products, services, experience, expertise will benefit significantly from our ultimate aim of a peaceful, stable, and prosperous Middle East. And the UK will also be an important voice in support of our efforts to bring greater cooperation among the countries of the Middle East to achieve a lasting peace and security. Britain can be a powerful advocate of the benefits of dialogue and influential in encouraging wider participation in this process. And it can also offer practical advice and assistance to bring that goal closer to reality. But it also means being realistic about the threats of regional security and the challenges to achieving peace. Foremost of these is the regime in Iran, which is intent on spreading instability and which will seize every opportunity to attack and undermine the Abraham Accords. So I hope the UK and its allies will be clear-eyed in assessing the challenges posed by Tehran and in recognizing that Iran's threat is not just from its nuclear program, but from its ballistic missiles, its proxy groups, and its ongoing wide-ranging efforts to destabilize the Middle East. None of our countries have any quarrel with the Iranian people. Indeed, if Iran were to play a reasonable role to act as a good international citizen, then that in itself would make an enormous contribution in our region. But the Tehran regime cannot expect reward for bad behavior. It must understand that its current policies are unacceptable and will bring only failure. I hope that the UK and its unique standing, and experience in the region, can make an important contribution in this process. Mr. Chair, ladies and gentlemen, I hope these remarks have given a brief insight into Bahrain's views on the Abraham Accords and on their implications in the region and for the UK Middle East ties. There is a long road ahead, but the prize is undoubtedly worth the journey. And I'm confident that our friends in the United Kingdom will be alongside us every step of the way. Thank you.
Ambassador Fawaz, thank you so very much for that overall assessment of the Abrahamic Accords from Bahrain's perspective. Thank you. Can I now move to His Excellency Ambassador Abulhoul from the United Arab Emirates, and a brief introduction, if I may, of the ambassador's background. The ambassador, studied politics and Arabic at Leeds University, and after that he went on to work with Barclays Bank in the UAE, and after that he moved on to work with Magrudy's, his own family business. The ambassador has been working very hard to promote cultural ties and literature throughout the Arab world, and for him a key aspect is connecting international partners through culture, fostering international cooperation through sport as part of what he wants to achieve as an ambassador. So it will be very good to hear from the ambassador his take on the current situation with the Abrahamic Accords, and also what he sees the future to be with regards to the relationship between the UK, Israel, Bahrain, and the United Kingdom. So, Ambassador, without further ado, the floor is yours.
Let me start by thanking and the Conservative Foreign and Commonwealth Committee for inviting me to talk to you today. It's a great honour to engage in conversation with such a distinguished audience. And I'm delighted once again to be speaking alongside my friends, Ambassadors Sheikh Fawaz and Ambassador Hotovely. We are proud to appear together and talk about the historic change that is happening in our part of the world. And I'm looking forward to hearing more of your questions in the Q&A, as I was saying, so I'll keep my opening remarks rather brief. We're now roughly 4 months away from that historic signing on the lawn of the White House. There is still enormous excitement surrounding the Abraham Accords, but this agreement isn't just a peace deal between our countries. Almost every day brings fresh news of how we are changing our region and making a difference to people's lives. Let me give you a few recent highlights. To encourage visits, last week, the UAE tourist visas for Israeli citizens were launched. Fly Dubai has been operating twice daily flights between Tel Aviv and Dubai for some time now. National carriers from Israel are all in the process of launching their own services. Our ever innovative tourism sector has ensured that many of our hotels have introduced kosher menus to cater for Israeli guests. Emirati and Israeli businesses, big and small, are announcing deals. So things are moving fast. Because of the Abraham Accords, two globally minded, innovative economies of roughly similar size are joining forces. That is driving economic, technological, cultural, and scientific progress in the region. With so much going on, there are many areas in the UK where the UK, an old friend of both the UAE and Israel, can and should get involved at many levels. One obvious, immediate, and practical area is vaccine development, production, and distribution. Israeli and Emirati companies have been cooperating for months now on COVID-19 research. And of course, the UK has been at the forefront of both developing a promising vaccine and becoming the first country to approve a drug for mass vaccination. Given the advantages of the Oxford-AstraZeneca vaccine in terms of cost and storage, it is potentially an excellent candidate for the developing world. If approved, the UAE will be an essential partner for getting this vital treatment to where it needs to go. Abu Dhabi has already done great work establishing a logistics hub from where vaccines can be distributed to the developing world. This follows the work done by Dubai International Humanitarian City, which has been used throughout the pandemic as its main hub for transporting personal protective equipment around the world. There are many other sectors, such as agri-tech and other areas of cutting-edge science, where both Israel and the UAE have long worked in partnership with the UK. And at last, we have conversations with all of us in the same room. Another area where the UK can join forces with the UAE, Israel and Bahrain is the promotion of religious tolerance and pluralism, as my colleague, Ambassador Sheikh Fawaz, set out. The mere act of Muslim Arab states normalizing relations with Israel is in itself a powerful rebuke to extremists and peddlers of hateful ideology across the world. It is no accident that the agreement is called the Abraham Accords. Abraham plays a prominent role as an example of faith in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. This shared belief reminds us all, in a region torn apart by religious prejudice and conflict, that there is so much that unites us. Our shared history must become a shared future of hope and peace. These convictions are driving our agenda on tolerance. It is an agenda the UAE is absolutely committed to taking forward. In the coming months, we will start construction on the Abrahamic Family House, an extraordinary multi-faith complex designed by British architect Sir David Adjaye that will incorporate a mosque, church, and synagogue. My team and I have been building ties with Britain's Jewish community and will continue to do so. It is all part of our effort to contribute in any way we can to the global fight against anti-Semitism and religious extremism. In conclusion, we are determined to build a warm peace with Israel. This is going to create change and opportunity in many areas. It will make the region more dynamic, more prosperous, and more stable. But we will need the help and support of our friends in the UK and the rest of the world. And thank you very much.
Your Excellency, Ambassador Abulhoul, thank you so very much for your remarks, giving a perspective from the UAE. And no doubt there'll be questions from participants here on a number of points that you've highlighted. Without further ado, can I now go to Her Excellency, Ambassador Hotovely, who was recently appointed Israel's ambassador to the United Kingdom. Her Excellency needs no introduction because she was Israel's former Deputy Foreign Minister, who served also as the Minister for Diaspora Affairs. She served as Minister for Settlement Affairs, and she was the youngest member of the Israeli Parliament in 2019. So without further ado, can I now give the floor to Her Excellency Ambassador Hotovely to share with us her remarks.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to say how much it's a pleasure for me to be here with you, with the Conservative Foreign and Commonwealth Council this evening. I would like to thank you for this very warm hospitality. Even though we're meeting by Zoom, we're still bringing some very, very fresh and good news from our region, as my colleague says. I would like to thank also to my dear friends, Ambassador Sheikh Fawaz and Ambassador Mansoor. We spent a lot of time together in the last few weeks, and very soon we will light a Hanukkah candle together. And I think it says a lot. As my friends mentioned, first of all, the tolerance, the religious respect we have for each other, and the fact we symbolize the moderate side of the Middle East. I think this is the big news that is coming from the Abrahamic Accord. The fact that the Middle East has moderate powers that want to take the region forward, as opposed to radical and extreme powers, just like Iran, that condemned the very, very important peace agreement. And we really believe that just like as Hanukkah miracle and the Hanukkah story tells us, that eventually the light will beat the darkness in our region. And this Abrahamic Accord is definitely a symbol for that. I would like to start maybe from where Israel started. Israel was born at 1948 with a very important statement in our independence declaration. Our first Prime Minister, David Ben-Gurion, emphasized it very well when we said we reach out to all our neighbors and we call them to sign peace agreements with us. This is part of the very essential and fundamental document that Israel was born into. When I was born in 1978, the first Israeli leader, Menachem Begin, managed to actually make this statement to a reality. And he signed the Camp David Accords. Everyone knows that the first peace with Egypt was there. And I think the whole world was excited. And the first Nobel Prize was given both to Sadat and to Menachem Begin. And I think that even though we had a very exciting moment by signing the peace agreement with our neighbors, the Egyptians, and with our great neighbors, the Jordanians, when we move forward, it's still important to mention the fact that this is really a change of paradigm. For many years, people in Israel said that you cannot move forward with the Arab world without solving the Palestinian issue. And after generation time, that Israel, with all its different leaders and the international community with its big involvement, tried to solve this conflict. And basically, the formulas that were on the table, the Palestinians refused time after time. I think the breakthrough today is that we want to move forward with peace. We want to make sure that every child that will be born in Israel and in the Arab world, we know that his future, his destiny is a destiny of stability, a destiny of peace, a destiny of cooperation. And I think my colleagues already mentioned, there are so many things on our table. We share the academic cooperation. We want to share the research cooperation. All countries that are surrounding us in this agreement have so much to offer. And I think that the biggest thing is the fact that people are excited. This is not just business to business or government to government kind of peace agreement. This is a real event where people from both sides are excited to meet each other. Well, as we speak, my Israeli friends are going to Dubai and to Abu Dhabi. My other friends are planning their triple trip to Abu Dhabi and Bahrain. I'm speaking to my friends and asking them to come and join me to Jerusalem, and I want to go with them to their countries. This is something that is really exciting. And I think we couldn't have reached that without brave leaders. And we should say that here. We need to say that because eventually peace is something that comes from a spirit of a leadership. And I think our leaders were brave enough to move forward and looked at the reality of a global world, a world of cooperation. The world doesn't belong to those who isolate themselves. The world really belongs to those who cooperate on the real challenges. And God knows we have so many. COVID is just one of them. So I think that this is a really good news to the region. And I'll be more than happy to receive questions just like my friends. And I wish us all a fruitful dialogue and a fruitful discussion.
Your Excellency Ambassador, thank you so very much for sharing with us your perspective on how Israel sees the Abrahamic Accords. And I agree with you, every good thing happens in 1978 when it's your year of birth, because that's my year of birth, 1978.
Does that make both of us young, or we're not young anymore? I don't know. It used to be.
I think after 10 years in this job, I don't know how to answer that. Without further ado, can I now hand over to Dr. Ilma Bottom to do the Q&A for tonight's session. Ilma, without further ado, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much, Rahman, and I do thank Your Excellencies for coming to speak to us tonight. For someone like me who used to be a foreign news correspondent in the past, and I worked a lot with the Middle East, witnessing the Abraham Accord and what is happening is really groundbreaking. So it's quite unbelievable in a positive sense of this word. And I wanted to start the Q&A actually with you, Rahman. As soon as we have the former envoy for freedom of belief and religion, I thought maybe you can comment or say something how that the Abraham Accord can influence, that subject, or religion.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Well, look, I think for me, as the United Kingdom's former special envoy for freedom of religion or belief, the United Kingdom's top priority is promoting freedom of religion or belief. And I think seeing the Abrahamic Accords with the State of Israel, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, all coming together is by mutual acceptance of one another. And I think with all three countries, what you have, it's the individuals of all different faiths coming together, being able to practice their religion freely and openly. As we said earlier, with Jerusalem being key to all three Abrahamic faiths. In the UAE, we had His Holiness Pope Francis there last year with Grand Imam of Al-Azhar, with the Fraternity Agreement, looking at bringing people together of all faiths on common values. And tomorrow I'm speaking at a seminar with the Archbishop of Canterbury and the Chief Rabbi, with the Sheikh bin Bayer in the UAE, looking at peace and on human values post-COVID-19. And in Bahrain, which I visited in 2019, met His Majesty King Hamad, we looked at the Bahrain now building the largest cathedral in the Gulf region, and also having some of the oldest churches in the region in Bahrain, as well as with the oldest synagogue. And for me, it was meeting Ambassador Huda Nunu, Bahrain's former ambassador to Washington, who herself was from Jewish background. So for me, seeing these three countries signing the Abrahamic Accords from a freedom of religion or belief, acceptance of one another, I think is absolutely superb, and it just lays the foundation on mutual commonality in that region. I know the different ambassadors have talked about peace, prosperity, security, but I think it's about values and acceptance of one another. And the signing of the Abrahamic Accords on the faith perspective, I think it's a key cornerstone of